Well, thank you very much for staying with us here on The Insight tonight. Like I said before we went on a short break, is that we'll be talking about matters the new university funding model. How do you understand it? How will it affect you as a parent and you as well as a student? Was there a need to get a new model? Was the old one having challenges? Those are just some of the key highlights and stories or questions that we'll be seeking to answer this particular evening here on The Insight. And I will be joined by Wex AMOS, the president of the Cooperative University, that is the Students Association of the Cooperative University in Karen.
In Karen.
Lavish estate.
Yeah.
Safe to say. And as well, Peter AMUNGA, who's an education expert. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Peter AMUNGA.
Pleasure to be here again.
Welcome. You're always welcome, by the way.
Thank you.
Well, the new university funding model, the president 3 weeks ago announced the new model that will be used starting with the new cohort that will join campus in September this year. Now, I want to start with you, Wex. In your opinion, as a student, especially from a private university, because the government will now not fund students who will be joining private universities as opposed to how it has been. Do you feel there was a need to introduce a new model to begin with?
I think there was a need, but timings are the issue. You find that we have a very nice model when you hear them explaining it, but when you try to understand it as a student, when you try to understand it as a new student, as a parent, it's somehow confusing. So I can say it's a nice model, but somehow confusing. There are some gaps that were left that I think they were supposed to be covered during public participation, though I don't know whether they did public participation. They would have come to the universities, face the student leaders, face students, and of course listen to them. Maybe they would have covered those gaps. But for now, it's a nice model, though with a lot of gaps that need to be covered before it starts to be implemented.
Interesting, because you're talking about public participation.
Yeah.
So in your opinion, students were not involved in this particular process?
Sure.
It was just a process that was done by, like the president said, his economic team and education stakeholders, top among them the vice chancellors.
I remember during the presidential working team on education, most of the things they were trying to cover were things on the new CBC. Those are the key issues that people concentrated on. So I don't remember, because I was at University of Nairobi, here in Nairobi, when we were trying to give our insights on the issues in education sector. I remember us proposing some, help amount to be increased. I remember us proposing university leadership taken back to the students. But I don't remember us discussing about the funding model. So I think this is a model that came out from the team itself.
Well, coming to you, Mr. Peter AMUNGA, you're a man who has a wealth of experience, expertise in matters of education.
Yes.
In your opinion, did the old model have loopholes in it that needed some adjusting, like the president said, to introduce the new model?
Yeah, change is very important. Change is as good as a rest. And I agree with the student leader when he says that the model is good. When you look at it from outside, from the face value, it comes out very nicely. The explanation looks good. The problem again is in the implementation. We as a country have had a problem when it comes to implementing anything that we try to do. We skip so many processes, parts of the cycle. I was on your show some time back, and we were discussing about the CBC, and we were talking about, did it follow the due process? It's the same thing that my co-panelist and the student leader is saying here. He's wondering, did it go through public participation? And it's true, it didn't. I've been in the education sector for many years. For such a thing to happen, we will have to be informed. We are writers, we are unionists, we are people who are part of all this. Yes, the president has a good idea. His advisors may have a good idea. But it's not tested and tried. So what happens is that young people like the panelists who's here with me, They will be like guinea pigs. They are experimental rats, sorry to use such a word, that we have to use them to experiment on such a very great, noble program. It's a nice program. It's a good model. But anything that is not tested and tried can be proven to be good. You first must test it. You must try it. So what's happening here is that we as Kenyans, as usual, and me as a parent, I'm a parent of children in the university, my worry is, will it work? Because many of these things that we have tried before have not worked. So this new one, will it work? It is a good idea that funding must be based on the student, according to their needs. The ones who are needy, more needy, get more funding. Those who are not needy, maybe they don't get funding. Those who are coming from private backgrounds don't get funding. But we must always remember this. There is nothing like a private child or a public child in this country. All these learners are Kenyans. Hakuna mtu private and mtu public. All these learners are our children. We need them anytime, anywhere. So we cannot really categorize somebody like private and public. When you go that way, already we have lost the script.
How then can we term someone who's, how would you term someone who's needy?
That's the great question. Who is needy? When you go to the word needy, if you try to even look at the Webster dictionary, the word need or needs is so broad. It's not a word you can define in a sentence. Because to be needy, you can be needy you can be thirsty and you are needy for water. What are you needy about? You may not be needy for money, but you are needy for education. You may not be needy for example, a person at my age. You may not be needy for a wife, but you may be needy for food. So the word need comes with so many, the description is so broad. So at the university level, when you want to describe a needy child, what needs are you talking about? What need are you saying that this child has needs and doesn't have needs? Every person comes with different needs. We are in this studio to this evening night now. His needs cannot be the same as mine, but we are all needy. You may not say that he's not needy and I'm needy. We are all needy. We have something we need. That's why in the Bible you see the prayers, the most important prayer goes like, God the Father, give us our daily bread. Yeah, our needs, meet our needs. Our needs are different. So who has been given the measure meter to measure your needs and my needs? That's the bottom line.
Before we because that is a story I really want to revisit on, the categories and the classification of who's needy, who's vulnerable, who should get this funding, who should not get this funding. But before I come back to you, Wax, from you, Mr. AMUNGA, I really want to know, because the president said, and this is the statistics that we do have, is that the debt, across the universities in the country is 60.2 billion.
Yes.
How then did these universities sink into such a very huge debt?
Very good question. You see, Kwame Nkrumah, the founder president of Ghana, said, we in Africa are like a man who's left to catch a train. So the train has left, and we're trying to catch the train. We are running to catch the train. Many times, these policies that you see coming up are called ambulance chaser kind of policies. We have not thought them through, because what you are asking should be the bottom line of what should best to our trying to solve this situation. How do we find ourselves in this hole that universities are owed, as I speak right now, 60, 60 is it billion,
billion.
Yes, in terms of just debt right now. The reason is this. Subsequent governments came up with different policies. Every new government that comes to this country comes with a different policy in education. President Ruto is trying to come up with his own policy now. Uhuru Kenyatta had his own. Mwai Kibaki had his own. I went to university the time of President Moi. Moi had his own way of thinking about the university funding. So it's like every person comes with a different policy of how to fund education. In the university, and he'll tell you, university, those who take education, I did education at the university, we have something called education funding. Is a whole, you know, is a curriculum, we call it in the university, they have a name for it. So that we went through it, you know. So the question that we need to be having as Kenyans is this: how did we go to this problem that we have now? When you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. What we are doing now is more digging. There's nothing like we are solving it. When we say we want to look for more needy children, we'll get more needy children. Even me, Mr. AMUNGA, I have a job, I have a pay slip, but I can tell you I'm also needy. I want to finish by telling you this. How does Equity Bank come up with something called Wings to Fly? I'm sorry to talk about a private project here on this studio, but you have some people who have been done it. They are succeeding in getting something called Wings to Fly, and they do it so well. We as a government, as a country, fail to do it because we have selfish interests. We are wired differently. We are tribal, we are corrupt, we have selfish thinkings that drive. For me to decide if he'll get his bursary, I'll think about where he comes from, who was his father. When I talk about who was his father, I'm already thinking tribal. When I ask you, what is your name? Where do you come from? Already I'm tribal. When I start thinking tribal, and in a country where we are talking about tribes getting jobs, tribes getting favor, then we have a problem.
Well, just like you say, if each and every regime comes up with their own way of trying to fix this mess, then the question will be, when will this mess be fixed? But coming to you, Wax, even as you want to, you know, add to what Mr. Peter AMUNGA says, yes, in your own capacity, as you know, the president of the Cooperative University of Kenya Students Association, that is, and even as a student generally, can this debt be attributed to mismanagement of funds by the university councils?
Well, most of this time at the university, you'll find our maybe university workers on strike. You go to Egerton University, you go to many universities, you'll find that all of them are crying. You go ask them for resources, maybe you want to fund an event that maybe in sports or any other events. The offices are crying, they don't have resources. So I think the problem have been the mismanagement of resources at the university level, and again, the release of fund from the government. So the release of fund takes time, and again, maybe sometimes in other universities, when they receive the fund, they mismanage the fund. So we have that problem leading to that debt.
Now, before, because I want us to listen to Dr. President William Ruto, yeah, during the, you know, when he officially announced the new funding model, in your capacity, yeah, because there's the debate about who's needy, who's, yeah, not needy. Mm-hmm. Certainly, mm-hmm, I'm concerned, mm-hmm, maybe if you were to fall under that category, yeah, based on the fact that you are in a private university, you'd, yeah, not be classified as needy, regardless of where you're coming from. Sure. I can certainly say, I, you know, did school at Multimedia University of Kenya, in AMUNGA, your neighboring, yeah, university. Yeah. Yeah. I was sponsored by my own parent, self-sponsored student for that, sure, case. But that doesn't mean I was not needy. Mm-hmm. So the question is, how do you classify who's needy and who's not? But before we jump onto that, yeah, or into that, I want us to listen to whatever President Dr. William Ruto had to say in regards to how the universities have been funded before, and now, why does he feel like there should be a new way of funding universities?
All of us remember that the current fees that university students are paying were agreed 34 years ago, the 16,000. And it has remained that all the years. We're all aware that also that we have huge, serious crisis in the funding of our institutions of higher learning. Our universities and TVETs are struggling. Many universities have court cases. They cannot pay their lecturers, and statistics show that the 54 billion that we budget for university education is less than 50% of the requirement of our universities to carry out the curriculum being taught in our universities. As a result, universities have been forced to cut corners, if I may put it crudely, and look for alternative ways of trying to get our students taught.
Like you've had the president, Mr. Munga, I want to come back to you. Do you honestly believe that this is the best model going forward to ensure that there is equity and each and every student gets a fair opportunity to get the proper education that he or she deserves?
Oh my God, I don't know. It depends on so many other factors. For example, one thing that has really affected universities today is when Matiang'i became the Minister for Education. I was working at the NAT headquarters, and we were doing a lot of research that time. And we advised Matiang'i, as a union, I was working under Wilson Sossion right now, and we advised Matiang'i that he came up with something called that A is not very important, that getting an A is not everything. And they reduced the number of people who can pass exams. Okay, there had been a problem in this country where people were getting so many A's. So there was something they were talking about, that exams were being stolen and so many people were going to the university. So because of that, the minister who came to education that time was called Fred Matiang'i. He came up with a new methodology, said, and the late Magoha, and they said, we have to reduce the number of A's. So they stopped something called standardization of exams, that they made sure that they totally reduced the people who are going to the university. They said, that year, for example, the first time, there were only 80 students who were able to get, I think, A minus and above. Only 80. Total of the people who had go to the university that year were less than 3,000 or 4,000. That is where the rain started beating us. We as a country, we bring politicians to dictate to us what to do in education systems. You see, education should be left for the educationists. The likes of people like Mr. AMUNGA, who is seated here with you. We are the people we have studied education. We know something called standardization. We know measurements in education systems. We know the end products of education. We know curriculum making. For example, even right now, what we're having a problem called CBC is an issue that's not yet solved as we speak. Because we have allowed politicians to think for us. That is where the problem is. Tell me, you say first.
Let me cut you short.
Yes.
Because you're talking about allowing politicians to dictate what happens in the education sector.
Yes.
What then are the education stakeholders in this country trying to do to ensure that politicians do not get to run the show onto matters education, where we need people with expertise?
Very good question. As educationists, personally I've been in the unions which represents the education. The problem is that we are outwitted. We are defeated in terms of finances, in terms of talking in parliament, because all decisions in this country are done through parliament. The bills come to parliament, they are passed. The financing is done by parliament, they are passed. Budgeting is done by parliament. We have no say, my brother. And let me tell Kenyans who are watching us this evening, at the end of the day, as a student leader, he's seated here. When I was a student leader, I've just been telling him before we came on the show, that at one point in 1989, before he was born, I was a student leader.
I also was not born in that
You were
time.
not born in 1989, 90, when Robert Oko died. I was a student leader at Kenyatta University, 1990. And as a student leader, I took action. I told my guys, comrades, our leader has been killed in this country, and we have to do something. And we took our responsibility as student leaders. Right now, even him as a student leader, they are curtailed in so many things because when we were campaigning last year, there was a word coming up called state capture. Universities have been captured. Education has been captured. We are under something called state capture. We can't come out. And what happens to us, and you have asked a very good question, is that we may try as much as possible to say something. But let me tell you, for the last, is it 10 years? Or I've been in the education sector 15 years. There's never been a minister for education who comes from the background of education. Never. All the people come, Kaimenyi, Matiang'i, Mutula Kilonzo. Right now there is a man by the name Machogu.
Yes.
None of them has sat in an education class to study education funding, education psychology, education physiology. None of them. So we have to fit in the political system because we can't dictate. We are just helpless.
Safe to say, because before Machogu, there was the late Magoha. And it's safe to say that this is a man who had, educational background.
Yeah, he had some educational background, but he was not an educationist.
Exactly.
He was a surgeon, he was a doctor.
He was loaded for the, changes he brought into the education sector. Coming to you, Wax.
Yeah.
Are you a student leaders? Because you yourself, you're the president.
Yeah.
AMUNGA is talking about there being a state capture in the education sector.
Sure.
We've had the statement before, state capture.
Yeah.
But now, like AMUNGA says and attributes it, it is in the education sector.
Yeah.
As the student leaders, because you are the mouthpiece of the students, do you believe or do you buy to that idea that indeed there is capture within the education sector? And what are you guys doing to try and ensure that the voice of the students are heard? Because at the end of the day, we cannot be talking about funding, we cannot be talking about who's need, who's not, if there are no students. So what are you guys doing?
I buy the idea, I buy the opinion that he has. It's true that education sector currently is under state capture. You find that we have CBC, something that was just introduced. People thought that, okay, we need to change this, we need to change the kind of education, the system of education that we are offering our students so that maybe we can be remembered. They did that to CBC, they came to university and TVETs, they changed the curriculum. Today, our TVET students are facing something, or they are undergoing CBET curriculum. If you look at this curriculum, no one was involved in such decision making. Today we have students joining classes from 7 to 7. They don't have time to relax. They have end semester exams that they undertake in the university, and again in each and every end of year they do NEC exams. We have many things that have been introduced. Today we have the new university funding board that have been introduced. No one is given an opportunity to give their opinion. Today they have done no awareness to our students. Students currently are choosing universities, but no one is aware. Parents are not aware, students are not aware. Today they look at the prices of each and every course, maybe a BCom in MKU and a BCom at KU. You find that they are different. But someone will be forced to go to a private university because they offer that course at a cheaper cost. But they are not aware that at the private university, they're not going to get the university funding. So there are a lot of issues that the government need to tell its people.
Now, gentlemen, there's what they call the means testing instruments, what they will use to fund the students. One of them is the background of the parents. There's gender, there's the course type, because there's the STEM and the arts. There's as well, this is where the bone of contention is. Previous schools. Did you go to a private school while in high school or primary, or did you go to a public school? As well, there are key issues which I believe should be of concern, and that is disability and matters marginalization. First of all, like I said, I personally went to Multimedia University as a self-sponsored student. But again, if you go back and the government wants to say, or the stakeholders in the sector want to say that now we look at your previous schools. And maybe I'm a needy student. And I went to a private school, courtesy of well-wishers.
Yes.
How then do they go about it?
Beautiful question. And let me not just that. There are some private schools in this country, very many private schools in this country, that the students who are learning there, they are not private. That's why I started by saying they are not private. They are well-wishers, donors who are helping them. I had a daughter at Kabarak, had a daughter at Sacho High School in Baringo. Many times the former president, Daniel Moi, will pay fees for children in that school. You know, it was out of his own volition. The students who are learning in Kabarak and Sacho those years, I don't know these times, they were not at rich. Some of them were very needy. But the president was using those schools that time as a situation to help needy people. I know schools in Kibra, in Madare, called Upbet schools, primary schools and secondary schools. They are run by missionaries. They are run by well-wishers. They are private. Registration reads private. But they're not private because the children who are in those schools are more needy than the children who are in public schools. Because those children in those schools are being sponsored by other faith-based missions. They are sponsored by well-wishers. Let me say this. If you go to Starehe High School, many people know Starehe High School here in Nairobi. Many people may think that Starehe High School is a public school, and some people even say it's for rich people. The people in Starehe, including Magoha, who was the former Minister for Education, learned in Starehe High School, which is that time was like a high-cost school, courtesy of well-wishers, people like you now. So we cannot determine a child by saying this one was in private and this one is in public. We go to private schools sometimes because somebody has sponsored you there. You may be in multimedia, as you put it, or in a COP University because somebody may be sponsoring you there. It doesn't mean you are rich to be in COP University or to be in multimedia or to be in USIU. Cleophas Malala, the current UDA chair, is my friend, my student at Kagame High School. Cleo will tell you he went to multimedia courtesy of a sponsor. He didn't go to to USIU because he was rich. It was because somebody sponsored him. So I want to use these words very carefully. The determination, the line between a private and a public student is too thin. Not in this country, it's not even allowed. In developed countries, what happens is this. Students, you get scholarship for them, whether they are private, they are rich, it doesn't matter. The rich ones will sponsor the poor ones. In Starehe High School, how a founder of Starehe was called Griffin. Let me just give less than a minute. Griffin's, what he was doing is this. All of you come to Starehe High School. When you arrive in Starehe, is when you'll discover who has more needs than who has no needs. Then from there, he'll get sponsorship for those ones who are already there. He first determines it when you are there. For you to know who is needing cooperative university, allow them first in the university. Once they report they are in the university, we will be able to know who is needy. But if you use other people to determine for you, corruption comes in, and very many good students will be left out.
Now, coming to you, Wex, do you think there should be other parameters used to determine who gets this funding and who doesn't? Because, like AMUNGA says, using parents' background or schools that you went to in your primary level of education and secondary school should not be the means. Should there be other parameters, or what parameters do you suggest?
Well, maybe echoing what you've just said is that we can use different parameters because needs yesterday are not the needs that we have today.
Yeah.
I might have gone to a private school maybe because my parent went out of their means to ensure that I get the best basic education, and they knew that moving forward the government is going to take care of me. In my university, when we are issuing bursaries, there are something that we do. Like we ask backgrounds for students who are applying for those bursaries. We of course go for their fee structures, and not fee structure actually, but we go for their fee statements. Using their fee statements, you can be able to tell that this student is needy. You know, looking at how they pay their school fees, sometimes they get 5,000 from a bursary from a county government, getting 5,000 from MP. So by looking at that, in the progress used when they are paying their fees, at least we can be able to tell. So I think there are other parameters that we can use. If you look at HELB today, they are using almost similar parameters, but again, they are not competent. They are not issuing, or they are not giving bursaries to the needy students. Actually, looking at 140,000 students who missed even a coin in their kitty this year. So we really need to look for other means so that we can be able to capture the best and the actual needy students. Because in Kenya, we always know that corruption is going to take over in this when we are choosing the needy students.
Well, just looking at the statistics is that 173,345 students will be joining campus, of course distributed to the 39 public universities and 30 private universities. And just as we talk about the parameters to be used to fund the students, is that in the categories, and we have the vulnerable, extremely needy, and of course the needy and less needy. The vulnerable will, around 21,814 students will get 82% scholarship from the government, and a loan of 55%. The extremely needy, were over 23,000, will get 70% scholarship from the government, and as well 40% in terms of loans. The needy, just over 26,000 students will get 53% scholarship from the government, and 30% in terms of loans. And the less needy, will get around 24,140, will get 38% scholarship from the government and 18% in terms of loans. Now, to begin with you, before I go back to AMUNGA, where does this particular new funding model leave private universities?
I think these are the end times for many private universities. Unless they continue with the silence they have today, because as I have told you before, is that you find private universities have made their fee structure look nice. Maybe a course like a BCom going at 130 at a private university might be going at 180 at a private university. So when a student is, selecting a university, look at the cheapest university. So they'll go for a private university. But later, after understanding this, most of the students will run to the private university, whereby they are going to get maybe 80% funding, 70% funding, or 38% funding, as stated by the government. So I think private universities currently they will be able to maintain their programs. But again, after 1 year, or maybe starting from January, when students now are aware of the actual prices they are going to pay in private universities, I'm telling you, private universities are going to, are not going to get customers as before.
Coming to you, AMUNGA.
I can help you this way. I can give some solutions now.
Briefly, yes.
Briefly. Private universities now can also go out for something called looking for scholarships for their students. If you go to any website looking for university abroad, as you apply, there's always a page for scholarship. Private universities in Kenya, whichever they are, be Kabarak, be Presbyterian University, be whichever they are, I can't remember the names, all of them, they need now to reach out to look for funding for those universities to attract students. So that as government gets funding for their public universities, a university like, say, Riara, I'm just giving an example. I'm sorry to use their name, I hope they will not get offended. If Riara now must go out and have a scholarship program in Riara, you see? So the funding that KU or Nairobi University or Maseno is having, Riara can also advertise the same and say, as you come to Riara, we can also give you funding for you to pay us after you finish college. Now, let me say something, ndugu yangu ambaye ni mwanafunzi leader. Just 1 minute then. Even those who are going to go to private universities, public universities to be funded, they still pay that money. One day or another, they have to pay that money. It's a loan. So if Kenyatta University can get a loan from Kenya government, why can't, for example, USIU get a loan from the American government to fund Kenyan students learning in USIU?
Well, as we wrap up this particular conversation, just parting shots from you guys, and as you give us your parting shots, the government and the president said they'll add 30 billion. Where will that money come from, owing to the economic situation in the country at the moment? Mm-hmm. And coming to you, AMUNGA, as you wrap up, is this new model a burden to parents? Starting with you, Wax, as you wrap up.
As he said that people now call him tax collector, 30 billion might come from the Wananchi. So I just want to, of course, call upon my student leaders to study the new model in the universities, and then we are going to have a meeting so that we can discuss and give our students the way forward. Because for a medicine student, for example, today, at end of maybe 6 years, might be having 2 million shillings of loan. So are we going to, are we producing university student graduates who are already having loans? When are they going to settle? How are they going to maybe, do their lifetime things? So I'm calling upon, of course, the government to look at the model, take care of those gaps, to ensure at least every student get an opportunity to get studies in each and every university, be it public or private university. And if he said before, there is no private student and there is no public student. Yeah.
Coming to you, Munga, in another minute. Yes.
You know, Ndugu, as you guys meet your people in the students' university councils, think about what we had come up with before Matiang'i's policy called parallel students, you know? In the university, we can have a wing of students who also can learn through parallel. It was happening, it was working. And also, employers like, say, Lookuptv, where we are today. If you want a journalist to learn in multimedia, Lookuptv can come up with a package to sponsor students in multimedia university, because it's a school of journalism, that students who are there, some of the press students in multimedia can be sponsored. Hospitals can also come up sponsoring medical students, and all other courses, lands and whatever it is, even schools, even teaching or land survey, agriculture. We have so many private firms. KCB Bank can sponsor students. Instead of Equity sponsoring only high school students, they can now come up and say, if you want to study BCom at Strathmore University, we have put there a fund. You study that, if you pass, we'll give you a job and you can pay us our loan.
Well, this is quite an interesting conversation that, unfortunately, I don't want to go on with this conversation, but because of time, we have to wrap up. Thank you very much, Wex, for joining us this particular evening. Mr. Munga, thank you very much. You're always welcome. And of course, I'll invite you again so that we can be able to dissect this new funding model even further. Like you've had it is a model that is good, but has a lot of loopholes, beg your pardon, that need to be addressed. And this is a conversation that will be going on even in the months to come, because it will kickstart with those students who will be joining campus starting September. Worth noting as well that the students who are, continuing students will go on with the funding that has been there. Well, that is all that we had for you today on the Insight here on Lookuptv. Remember, I'll be coming to you each and every Wednesday with the Insight, just to discuss matters affecting you and give you the information that you deserve. Until then, see you. I've been Ian Keitani, and to the team behind the scenes, my producer Nalima, Amwai, Orondo, Sean, and everybody else behind the scenes, may God bless you. See you again next week. And like I always say, God bless.